So we've done all of this work with the console, with creating models. Oh, Robert, great question about the retro. I apologize, folks. I kind of screwed up on the calendar. And today is sort of a funny week with the holiday on Friday and really tomorrow as well. Um, my original thought was to have the retro be tomorrow. Um, Honestly, I may just play that by ear as well because I know some folks have family commitments in the morning tomorrow for the lecture, and there's a lot of ground to cover in tomorrow's lecture as well, to be totally honest. So I think if kind of things, if I can keep us moving at a pretty good pace in the morning, we'll do like a short mini retro since it's only been a short week. Otherwise, I just may drop it entirely, and then our retro next Friday will just cover this weekend and next week. We could also retro this afternoon. That is a really good point, Francisco. I actually hadn't thought about that. We can figure that one out at lunch. And the reason I want to do that is because I do want to make sure that we start looking at running Django's server and what's going on here. And now that we've got all these models, starting to get that data out into the world. And so what we're going to look at, and what we haven't looked at a lot yet, is this URLs PY file. And URL stands, I think, for something like Universal Resource Locator, right? Think link, think route, think path. And this should start to bring up memories of React Router and routing and routes and paths. And we saw, let me make sure I'm in the right directory here. I can start my Django server, which is then Django is running a web server on my local host on port 8000 that interacts with all of my Django code. Now, there's not a lot here right now. This is a sort of default Django homepage that is hidden somewhere in the depths of the Django source when it's installed. And I'll just sort of have the console up here. Let's actually look at maybe the network tab. Let's see if I can't make this a bit smaller as well. There we go. And we can kind of watch what's happening here. And so in the project directory for my Django project, by default, this path here, admin, is created. And if I look at this function path, which is one of the Django built-ins that we can see right here, we import from the Django URLs directory. Something about a URL resolver, and we give it a route, and I can see it takes 2 arguments, and this sure looks an awful lot like a URL or a route or a link, and then this points to something else that we can't see, some other module, and we'll see what this is in a second. And we had a quick look at the Django admin page yesterday, and I'm not going to worry too much about logging in right now. But the reason that when I put /admin on my website, my Django into the browser, and Django knows what to do with that is because of this line right here on line 21. And if instead I change this from admin to foobar, and I stop and restart my server, this works just fine. Admin, Django has gray error messages in the console because it has all of this gray code, Python code that gives us really nice error messages. And it tells us using the URL configuration defined in the Pokédex project.urls in our URLs PY directory, Django tried these URL patterns, and there's only this one, foobar, But the current path, which is this part of our URL, everything after our port, didn't match any of those. But now this path, foobar, takes me to our admin site. So just like with React Router, where you had a path and a component that got rendered, we have a path that can then point to stuff. And we can have it point to a bunch of different stuff. I can have it point to a view function, which is what we'll see in a bit. I could even have it point to another URLs PY in one of my Django apps and sort of do some nesting. So there's a lot of different things that we can do with our paths. And in fact, I think what I will do is let's see how we can connect our path between the main project and apps. So what I am going to do is Python manage py, and let's see what I want to call this. I believe the start app. I think I have that word right. Let's call it geometry app. And now that I've created a new Django app, I do need to update installed apps, and we'll add geometry app. And let's do the following. Let's create a URLs py file for this new Django app. And let's go back here. And I'm just going to copy all this existing stuff. And we're going to put it there. And the things I don't need is admin, because I don't need that. And we're going to have one route that's going to be our homepage. And we'll see momentarily what to put here. And let's have a route for our geometry app is going to be, we're just going to do a little bit of work to do things like calculate the area of a square and circle, really just for demonstration purposes. So I'll make a path that is a circle. And over here, in the main project one, I'll add geometry, and it's going to go to geometry app. Let's me make sure I get this right. I believe it is, let me import this. Actually, I should probably import it right here from geometry app URLs import. Yeah, let me make sure I get this bit correct. And let me quickly do a sanity check here to make sure that I have this bit here correct. Yeah, and there's actually, I apologize. We can actually, this is slightly different. I actually want to use include, what I want to do, include geometry app.urls. So there's a number of things that we can do here. And in fact, I'm getting a little bit ahead here with all of this. And I think maybe just to demonstrate something even simpler, let's do a hello world. And we'll have it look at views.world. And let me show you what this is. So what I want to do is in my project, let's create a file named views. And let's open that up here. And I am going to borrow a little bit of guide code from over here. I just want this rendering function. And I want to have hello world. And we're going to feed it an object called request. That's going to be an HTTP request. And so the link here is URL patterns with path. We give it the URL, the path, and then we tell Django what to do when you get an HTTP request to this path. And you can either tell Django, call a function, and we're going to see what that function looks like to do some stuff. Or, hey, Django, this actually has some more routing. Go look at this other URL's PY. And we'll see what that looks like in a minute. And we are also going to want probably from Django, let's see which one it is. It might be Django HTTP. So a server receives an HTTP request from the browser and sends back a response. Django does the work, and we don't need to use it here, but of feeding that HTTP request into this hello world function. Just like we saw with serializers, Django takes that HTTP request and it uses these classes that it has and it creates an object for it, because that's how we do everything in Django land with Python. So we can actually return an HTTP response and say, hello world. Now, hopefully I haven't missed something.
One typo. There's a typo in the geometry. You're missing a paren.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm just going to comment that out for now, in fact, just to get the hello world going. And it would help if I had started my server. Let's do run server. And thank you, Clarice. And it looks like views is not defined. So I actually made a pretty straightforward error here because I got myself a little lost. From dot views import hello world. Right, I still have to import the module or the class that I'm using, or I can use the special includes with other URLs PY. But here, I just want to directly import this view function that I'm using. And so let's see what our error is now here. Interesting. Yeah, if we have hello world go away, I suspect this will go away as well. Yeah, so there's a little bit of trickiness going on here in that Django does have like a default page. Um, and it is trying to match the homepage but not finding anything. And this can get a little funny. Sometimes the order of stuff in here matters. And I just need to add a comma. And I think this is, let's see if I have this right. A little bit of sort of magic that Django wants us to do. So Django is getting a little confused because now that I've added in this hello world, if I don't pass a path, it doesn't know where to go. So I'm not actually quite sure where the Django homepage lives, but just as a little bit of a hack, I think I'm just going to use this hello world method in multiple places. And I think that will take care of it for us. There we go. So sorry about that. Let me explain what's happening now, and then I'll explain the issue that I ran into. So what's happening now is in my browser, I say browser, go to localhost on port 8000 to the root path. That request goes to Django. Django says, cool, what do I do with this HTTP request? Let me look at my URL patterns. Well, it doesn't match hello world. It doesn't match admin, but here's my root default path that's nothing. It does match this. Let's call this view function. Okay, I should construct an HTTP response that says hello world, and we can see it's hiding in here. In fact, if I look in the network tab. And the issue I was running into is Django is doing a little bit of something under the hood. And it is, sorry, I lost track of something for a sec. One moment, folks. I'm not quite sure how Django gets us to its default homepage. And I'm not quite sure why when I do this, it breaks that. But Django is no longer sort of doing its default behavior, which we don't need to worry about so much. but that is the issue that I was running into. And my solution was I just need to give Django a default homepage to go to. So this is a pretty simple example, but it illustrates connecting these two bits of my browser makes a request and then it goes to this URL patterns that searches for the URL that matches. And then it goes to hello world and calls this view function. Right. And so this is a really simple example of that. But we can start to do more interesting stuff. And most of the time, what we'll want to do is not this hello world. And I think I'll comment that out and I'll put this one up here. But something like this, where we point to the URLs PY of a Django app that we're using. And let's see, Clarice, you had mentioned I have a typo lurking in here somewhere, I think.
Yeah, I'm missing a parenthesis.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that would be key. And here I can repeat this pattern. And in fact, let's do a little bit of view functions for this as well. Let's go to the views PY in the geometry app in Django. So I created this geometry app just to kind of demonstrate stuff. And this is like each app is almost like its own little mini Django, and you can kind of link them together and separate concerns. And so for the project, I've got this URL routing. And when it gets an HTTP request that starts with geometry, I say, all right, look at this other URL routing here for this URL patterns Django app. And now I need to write a couple view functions here to do stuff. And let's just do def geometry hello world. And a view function always needs to take in as an argument. You should always just pass it a variable named request, even though we don't always use it. And you'll often want to use things like these built-in Django HTTP classes to do various things. And HTTP response is the simplest one. And especially for sending back JSON, since we'll use React really to build the user interface in the front end, that's often mainly what we need to do. But every view function needs to return an HTTP response at the end of the day.
Hey, Adam, I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
What exactly is the use for again?
What is the views for it?
Yeah, what does this do?
Yeah,
What is the
exactly.
purpose?
Let me hook these functions up and then we can talk through it.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, totally. I'll maybe just call this circle area. And I'll just change this just for the moment, just as a placeholder. So in Django, routing is done in these URLs PY files where you give it a path and then you either give it more routing, sort of nested, or you give it a function that in Django we just call a view function. Because back in the day, like we would actually use like return HTML, like we wouldn't write it this way. We'd use other code to construct it, but you actually like put HTML. And so that's why these things are called views, because it sort of the traditional way of doing this stuff was this function would put together your HTML. But now that we use React and JavaScript running in the browser to build all the HTML and all that stuff, these functions really just return data. So views.py holds the functions that send the data from our server to the browser, to the client, with this stuff that we care about. So this is how we build an API. So if we were to build a Pokemon API, we would have these paths and these view functions that use our Pokemon models and serialize the JSON and send it back. And that's what we'll see a bit later. But I just want to make sure that I have this working properly so we can watch it in action. So let's see what happens if I do this. Let's see if I add a slash at the end, because Django is a little funny about that. So let's see. I think Django does not like it when you put a slash at the beginning of paths. I probably have a couple errors to resolve here. So that was the error. So this is actually a pretty huge gotcha that's really confusing. It is not uncommon to write the root path or the base path with just a forward slash. However, that is not how Django wants us to do it. It just wants an empty string. So that is, I think, one of the big gotchas to watch out for. So what's happening here is this. Let me go ahead and clear this. My browser sends an HTTP request. Right? It bundles up in this special text format. That's the format of HTTP to a URL at this IP address, which has, or localhost, like I could probably do localhost as well on this port, which in this case is on my own computer, but this could be anywhere. And then we have the rest of the URL and the path here. And HTTP requests have a method. This is a GET request, and we'll talk about that later. And you can see here we got the response back and stuff. And then this is what my Django server sent back. And what Django did, and you can see right here in the logs here, we have this GET request that came in. And Django says, cool, I've got a new HTTP request. Let me go to the URLs PY for the whole project and just start from the top down and find the first path whose pattern matches. And we can actually add patterns in here. I think we'll see that on another day. But just to kind of get us started here. And it says, cool, this geometry pattern matches. What should I do? Well, in this case, what I'm telling Django to do is look at another URL's PY file with this special include function. Go to the geometry app, look at the URL's PY file there. Same approach, URL patterns. Django says, cool, slash geometry, that matches this. Okay, I should call this geometry hello world function that lives in this file views.py, because this used to be where you would build the HTML and send it back, and that was the view. You had the model and you had the view. Now we really just send back data. And this takes that HTTP request. If we wanted to do stuff with it, we could. Right now, we're not. We use this class Django gives us to construct an HTML response with a message body, and that returns it. And then Django does the work of turning that into stuff that can be sent over the wire back to the browser. And so if I was to go here to circle area, And I probably just got that route wrong because indeed the route is just plain old circle. But let's go ahead and change this. Actually, let's leave it as circle for now. I'll fix it here and we'll just do circle. And I see that I get this other message, right? Where Django does the same process of routing again. Oh, I got geometry / circle. Well, let's go here, geometry matches. Then I go here. Okay, let's go in here, top to bottom. And actually, really, I should put circle first. And Django says, well, circle matches, let me call this view function. And so what we can do is, this is like the simplest possible example, but we can start to build on this. I can calculate, I can start to do stuff in here, right? I could do like, if we import from Python math.py times, I don't know, there's something that approximates the area of a circle. And maybe instead of returning a string, we want to return an F string. And so this is a really simple example, but this is the beginnings of building up more complex stuff. And really the next step, which I think we should break for lunch here, and we'll get more into this tomorrow, but we would want to do something along the lines of, let's say, path Pokemon. Include Pokemon app.urls. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this whole thing. And in the Pokemon app, let's create a URLs PY. Let's put this there. And let's get rid of the things we don't need. Those are not the views that we want. Let's just have this. And let's just name this, I'll just name this Pokemon Hello World. And let's close this out. And let's look at Pokemon app use PY. And so actually we have this get Pokemon method already. Now there's a little more work to be done here. So I'm not going to work on using these right now, but let me just maybe do something like this. And let's maybe do a Pokemon equals Pokemon objects first, which is a query that we saw before that we can use with our Pokemon model. And let's maybe grab an HTTP response from Django HTTP. We probably need from, oh, this would be a typo in my code. And we should have a serializers for our Pokemon app. Though it seems to be lurking somewhere else. Because I have a serializer for the Pokemon move. So we'll connect that piece later. That's really where the serializers come into play, is using them here. But what we can do at least is return HTTP response, and we can say something like an F string. a Pokemon's name is a Pokemon name. Just to get a simple kind of thing going here. And let me make sure I don't have an issue here. I think that is again just Django being funny. And I probably need to save this file and restart my server and see if that error goes away. And it looks like I probably have a typo, or even better, I'm simply not importing this. So from the views module of this Pokemon app, Django app, let's import this function. And now let's see if I got this right. So we would want just Pokemon. And now we have Pikachu. So I wasn't able to get to, we had the serializer for a move, but not for a Pokemon. But if I had that Pokemon serializer code already ready to go, we could just pretty much drop that in. And so this is a simple example, but now what we've got is the whole Megillah of the routing, the view function to talk to models to get data, and using our models to talk to the database and sending that back to the user in the browser. So I want to pause and see what questions people have. A lot of today's assignments will focus more on models and relationships. And this stuff we will get more into tomorrow, but I wanted to at least start kind of introducing it and give a preview. Robert, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I got a little confused. Why do we have two URLs.py up here?
Yeah, great question. We have two URLs.py because what Django lets us do is each Django app can have its own URLs.py and its own routing. So like here for the geometry app, I'll just close out all the other ones for the moment to make it easier to look at stuff. And that is a really good question, by the way. So let's start at the very beginning. The whole Django project has a URLs.py. And this is created when we create a new Django project. This is where the path for the admin is. And what we normally do here at the project level URLs PY is like the value of Django apps is separation of concerns, right? Different kinds of ice cream in the freezer. And so just the same way for, say, this one app with Pokemon moves, or this one app with Pokemon, or maybe user accounts would be another app for our Pokemon world. I have models in here and models in the other one. I can have different routing. So as my Django project gets really big, I can keep stuff more organized, and this doesn't become just one massive list. So what you often see is in the URL patterns, the URLs PY for the whole Django project, the paths point to other URLs PY files. And the way that we do this is Django gives us this function include, and we give it then sort of the namespace of the Django app that has this other URLs PY. And this admin site, because it's kind of built into Django, it's handled a little differently, a little specially, but this is how we'll add routes for our Django apps. So just like kind of in installed apps and settings PY, we add something, we'll often want to do that here. So here, whenever an HTTP request comes in that starts with geometry, Django will then say, cool, let's look at the URLs PY in the geometry app. And then it looks at these paths. And so this lets me just keep everything organized. And again, kind of how many Django apps you want to make is a bit of a design decision. You all could totally get away with just using one big Django app for most of what you'll do in this course. There are a few times here and there where starting to have separate ones starts to have more value. And the nice thing is though, if keeping the apps small, like I could even move this app between projects if I really wanted to. The idea being it should be really self-contained. And so then our Pokemon app also has a URLs PY, and I don't have a lot here right now, but you could imagine like where we would go with this is, you know, like Pokemon / moves, right? Pokemon / trainer, Pokemon / trainer / Pokédex, or Pokemon / trainer / stable, and so on. That's sort of where all this is going. Does that answer your question a bit?
Yeah, I think so. It sounds like your URL files, they kind of help navigate based off where you're trying to get to. Then the views handle that backend functionality.
Yeah, think of it like, so it's very similar to the create routes file with React Router, where you had routes and then you rendered components. URLs PY, the main thing to remember is the Django program, all of this that is running on server side. Now, we are running our Django servers on our laptops, which is also where we've got our browsers. But really, our Django program is going to run on a Linux box in the cloud on Amazon Web Services. And so then I here as the user in my browser, you know, Victor, Platoon, Pokemon.com / Pokemon / Pokemon / trainer, or / trainer / Pokédex, or to go all the way back to what was the Pokédex? What was the Poke API that we used? Poke API. Right, so this is what we're building. This is what our Django program will do. This is what we've been learning all about models and serializers for. And the URLs PY is about this part of things. Our server gets an HTTP request with the URL. How does it know what to do? That's what we tell it in URLs PY. And then you're absolutely correct. We give it a view function. And because the routing can get quite complex, I want to be able to sometimes have different URLs PY files for different parts of my whole system, and I can knit them together. And that's what we see happening here, is knitting these different routes together. But at the end of the day, this Pokemon one goes into the Pokemon over here, which calls this hello world views function. And this does stuff. It talks to the database and then sends it back to the server. So our Django program and our Postgres server, really remember that they're running somewhere other than where the browser is most of the time. That's why this whole system is built this way. For development purposes, we run it all on the same machine, but that's not how it's, you know, what it's architected for. So I hope that helps a little bit. We ran a bit long, so I just want to see if folks have any other questions. Otherwise, we will wrap for lunch.
Can you drop the link in like Slack or something for the assignments that you want us to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, awesome. Let me get you all the assignments. I'll get the videos up shortly. Let me in fact stop recording.